see Weston here, Bennington, Wilmington, a lot of far-flung places. So Wardsboro, is Reedsboro in the house? Did they make it? I know Whiting. See Whitingham. So folk made it over the hills and dales and got here in the snow. Good. So Sue Westa is going to pass around an agenda, and then she's going to pass around the RSVP sheet that we have to facilitate your signing in. If you're not on that sheet, if you would, just somewhere on the back, write in your name and contact information. Okay. Well, thanks to everybody for coming out. I'm very excited about this. I've been with the Windham Regional Commission for almost 10 years now, and broadband has been an issue since before I got here, high-speed broadband. And of course, technology has changed radically just in that 10 years. And how we use it too, right? Not just email and the internet, but now everybody has the high-definition televisions and other things. And also the way we're doing business is changing. So, but one of the things that's driven me nuts, which I'm sure has driven you nuts, is all the talk about broadband without the capacity to actually do anything about it. And so the reason why we got involved in this when Regional Commission is the Broadband Innovation Grant were made available, and ValleyNet and Rural Innovation Strategies, we'll introduce our partners here in just a second, they had actually submitted a letter of intent. And so we reached out to them to say, hey, you put in this letter of intent to develop a regional broadband strategy. We can be the means by which you reach out to the municipalities and do this work. And we thought it was a great group to team up with, because ValleyNet is behind EC Fiber, and Rural Innovation Strategy technology is what they do. So it seemed to be the right people, and their goal is to extend high-speed broadband to unserved and underserved areas, really agnostic of who does it. And so the idea here is to develop, it's pretty straightforward, but there are a lot of moving pieces to it, a feasibility study, and then see what the feasibility is to run high-speed broadband to unserved and underserved areas, then develop a business plan that reflects what was found in that feasibility study, and then we'll know what pieces need to come together to actually get it implemented. And so we're going to be getting down, so this will be getting down to actual technology, actual dollars and cents, what will actually pencil out to make this work. And ValleyNet has experience with EC Fiber, and these folks will be able to answer all kinds of technical questions that you might have. Welcome. Make yourself at home. Oh, if I turn it on, see, I'm technology challenged. So the agenda is I'm going to introduce you to the project team. We're going to go over the purpose and scope of the project, talk about what communications union districts are, town participation and expectations in this process, the project timeline, and then field any questions you might have. I'm Chris Campany, Executive Director of Windham Regional Commission. Sue Westa is our Senior Planner, and she is our staff lead on this. Rob Fish is with the Public Service Department. Alex Kelly is with Rural Innovation Strategies. Carol Monroe is with ValleyNet. And then I also want to introduce Sarah Lang. She's with Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. They've partnered with us on a lot of this too. Everybody's coming in, just make yourself at home. And we've got a sign-in sheet coming around, which we'll explain a bit more about. So what is the Windham Regional Commission? So we were established in 1965. We serve 27 towns in southeastern Vermont. It's all the towns in Windham County, Reedsboro, Searsburg, and Winhall in Bennington County, and Weston and Windsor County. And our mission is to assist towns provide effective local governance and work collaboratively with them to address regional issues. And in the absence of county government in Vermont, the regional commissions are essential link between local, state, and federal government. But the commission, just so you know, it consists of town-appointed commissioners. We're actually a political subdivision of the state. And so for those of you who don't know much about us, the people that we answer to directly, the commissioners, are actually appointed by your respective select boards. So you have a voice within the commission. And now I'm going to turn it over to...
Sure. Hi, everyone. Alex again. I'm with Rural Innovation Strategies, Inc. You might know us by the Center on Rural Innovation. We're kind of sister organizations. What we do is we help towns across the country diversify their economies and build digital economy ecosystems. And broadband is obviously the foundation of that. So, we're here partnered with Carol and ValleyNet to drive the business plan and feasibility study, as mentioned. Excited to get into
Could you
that.
speak up louder and slower, please?
Sure. I apologize.
I'm older.
So I'm Carol Monroe, and I had been the CEO of ValleyNet. I'm now the chair of the ValleyNet board. ValleyNet is a not-for-profit, and it is the company that does all of the construction management and operations for EC Fiber, East Central Vermont Telecommunications District, the very first CUD in the state. And it's also the entity that does the same type of work for Lime Fiber, and that's from Lyme, New Hampshire. A little bit different strategy there. Lime Fiber is a privately held group of investors. It's not a municipality, but ValleyNet does the work for them as well. And to give you some idea, it's like EC Fiber is now, at the end of December, came in with its fourth revenue bonds for another $10 million, and that should be all of the revenue bonds that we've requested have sold out in just days each time we've done that. And this is the last of the revenue bonds that will fund the fiber to the home project for 1,400 miles and to all the unserved areas, underserved, unserved areas in the EC Fiber district. There are some other areas that it doesn't cover at this moment in time that are well cabled, and it's not that we won't do that, but it's a different business plan and a different business model to hit the cabled areas, and that's so those areas will be built, but they'll be built under a different business plan. But it's been pretty successful. It's been cash flow positive, EBITDA positive since 2015. About 250 miles and 1,000 customers. And as of today, it's been very close to 4,300 customers. By the end of 2021, they should be at about 7,500 customers. So it's been a great experience to be working with them to see how this could happen. Their startup money came from private investors in $2,500 increments. They raised $7 million in that way to build out those first 225 miles. It was a difficult time. We learned a lot of lessons, and those are the lessons we hope to impart to all of you, so we don't make the same mistakes. Certainly, there's no reason to do that.
Keep the volume up. Don't get tired.
Okay, I'm trying.
Yes.
So we were going to go around real quick and just have you say your name and what town you're from. Or back there.
Steven Marlboro.
Bill Ashford, Marlboro.
Phil Edelstein, Whitingham.
Allie Edelstein, Whitingham.
Malcolm Moore, Marlboro.
And Bartlett, Marlboro.
Omar Smith, Leedsboro.
Wayne Forrest, Whitingham.
Caroline Melvin, Jamaica.
Chris Roberts, Jamaica.
Dave Jones, Brookline.
Chris Olson, Dummerston. Jeff Gouger, Newfane.
John Sebastian, Wardsboro.
Peter Sebastian, Wardsboro.
John Muse, Townsend.
Patrick Borland, Town of Brattleboro.
Jennifer Burnell, Whitingham.
David Jones, Halifax.
David Scholes, Town of Brattleboro.
Court Trowbridge, Putney. Ann Manwaring, Wilmington. Sarah Lang, Brattleboro.
Gretchen Haverlund, Wilmington, and Whitingham.
Lauren Harkowitz, Wilmington. Allison Peterson, Stratton.
Betsy Wadsworth, Stratton.
Tabby Friedman, Dover.
Shannon Wheeler, Dover.
Vicky Capitani, Dover. Carolyn Shea, Wardsboro.
Andy Snelling, Townsend. Bob DeServo, Townsend.
Lisa Fortin, Wardsboro.
Donna Fernandez, Wardsboro.
Paul Spector, Wardsboro.
Greg Melmans, Jamaica.
CJ King, I live in Jamaica, but I'm here representing Grace Cottage Hospital, Family Health and Hospital in Townsend.
Ronna Zlockover, Vernon.
Munson Hicks, Vernon.
Jim Linville, Weston.
Todd Horner, Key, New Hampshire.
Bruce Crowder, Londonderry, and background for the Chester Telegraph.
Charlie Goodwin, Weston.
Annie Fucci, Weston.
Joe Perdano, Marlboro.
Joe Blooming, Jamaica.
George Morrow, Londonderry.
Toby Fitch, Londonderry.
Russ Hodgkins, Westminster.
Sheila Morris, Guilford.
Zon Eastis, Guilford.
Peter Rude, Guilford.
Karen Astley, Putney.
Tom Rinskell, Wardsboro.
Chris Lynch, Matrix Design Group.
Roger Turner, Dummerston.
Lynetta Powling, Newfane.
Eric Hatch, Bennington. Tim Scoggins, Shaftesbury.
Pete Van Allen, Newfane.
Steve Lemke, Guilford.
In case you're curious about me, I live in Newfane. Our offices are in Brattleboro. So just for folk who just come in, we've got the RSVP list going around as a sign-in sheet. If your name's not on there, you can just check your name if you find your name on there. If it's not, please write your name and information on the back of the paper. And there were agendas going around too. We may have, looks like we got more turnout than RSVPs, so we may have run out of agendas. But that's okay, you don't necessarily need a paper agenda. So we're gonna turn this over to our colleagues here. Here you go.
Great.
Cool. Well, as we mentioned, and let me know if I'm too quiet or too fast. As we mentioned, we're developing a business plan and a feasibility study for participating towns. And I think the best thing to do would actually just be to dive right into what is involved in each of those. So I'll take the feasibility study and you take the business plan. Great, so the first thing, and one of the most important foundational things is what is called a take rate survey. And that's where we ask the residents of towns a number of questions which will inform basically everything else we do. The survey gets at what their current speeds are, what they would like to have, it gets at who their providers are, what they would be willing to pay, and it just is a foundation for everything else that we do after that. We do an analysis of the served and underserved areas. We also look at what the bandwidth needs are and what the tiers of bandwidth the customers want and what we can deliver. We do a vertical asset inventory, which vertical assets are poles. We figure out where the poles are, where we can lay the fiber and string the fiber. We do an analysis of what the backhaul providers could be. We develop deployment routes and methods. Yep.
What's a backhaul?
Great question.
So backhaul would take this network to the web, to the internet. And so the network here would be built with redundancy from town to town, hub to hub. Within that network, probably from at least 2 locations, if not more than 2, there would be access to the internet, also providing redundancy to the network. So we take it from wherever the main location would be here, which has to be determined, to Springfield, Boston, New York, Montreal, all those various areas that have locations, central locations for all the internet providers. So that backhaul is the fiber taking you from this network into the web.
Right. So it's not the provider, but it is connecting the provider and all the fiber to the main web. Is that correct?
So we'll be looking for providers who have fiber in this region. So we know First Light has some fiber in this region because they bought SovereignNet, and SovereignNet built some of the assets to the schools and so on. As an example, we know CCI has some fiber in this region. And I think there's 1 or 2 other providers that have fiber in this region. So we would be looking at partnering with them to take it out to the internet as a whole, and then from different locations for redundancy.
So again, deployment routes and methods. Where do we string it on poles? Do we need to bury it anywhere? Where are the channels that we take it? Communication union districts. Robert is going to talk a lot about that in a bit, but that's an element of this feasibility study. And then lastly, the technical design, and we need to do this obviously because we need to know how much it costs and to incorporate all of that in the business plan. Before we move on, this is a lot of information. Any other questions about what any of these elements of the feasibility study are?
So our town is very rural. There are a handful of residents that are in town, and everyone else is out on dirt roads. So what are we talking about here? How do we get to those people?
In the same way you would get to the people on the main road. So the commitment here is to serve those that are, well, your district will decide this as a whole, if you go to route of a communication union district, but to serve those unserved first, and that includes those out a mile or so, out on the edge of town. Those are the least served premises today.
It's not a mile, it's 20 miles.
It's the least served today. So if you want to look at examples, take a look at Granville, or Hartford, or Hancock, or Pittsfield, at the base of the Green Mountains. All of those towns are extremely rural, about 250 premises or less in those areas. Rochester has a few more than that. And there is fiber built to every premise that's on the grid. Okay, and I say that because it's not that you can't serve people off the grid, but that's a whole different story. You take them one at a time and determine how to do that. Yes.
So which elements of the feasibility study would be conducted at the high level, like by Windham Regional or whatever other organization, and which elements would be up to the individual participating municipalities?
In gathering the data, so Windham Regional has already provided us with the data that's fairly public data you can find easily, miles of road, how many households in every town, the economic average household income, that type of information we already have. And so what we're looking for the towns to do is, number one, to have a representative that can answer questions where we don't have the data or it doesn't make sense. Because sometimes when you look at that data, there's some things that just don't make any sense. But more importantly, to participate in the survey. So the survey, we all know, I mean, when you get a call, what do you do with it? You get a call? Right. So we need to figure out how to get this survey done in a way in which we can get enough participants to make it valid. And that may mean tackling it from all sorts of different directions, whether it be town meeting, a person at town meeting taking surveys, or a person at the local recycle center doing surveys, hopefully on a nice sunny day, and so on. Mailing them out if we have to do that, online if we can do that. We're talking about broadband here, so people might have to do it from work from their work offices in order to take the survey, but we want to make sure that we get those results in to make it a valid survey, because that's going to also kind of tell us what we need to know. Feasibility, I look at EC Fiber. I know what percent of subscribers I can expect in any given town based on the data that we've collected. And so we have a history there from towns that are just like you.
Is this going to be location neutral? In other words, whether you're 20 miles away from town or 20 feet away?
The goal is to provide universal, ubiquitous service.
So there won't be charges for laying cable up to the end of the road?
No, but there may be charges for laying it up to that person who has a mile driveway.
Okay, that's
Okay, right? Because, so for access, that would be part of the projects, but for access from the road or the last pole to your home up a driveway will be sort of your responsibility. We look for a clear path is what we call it, whether that be on poles or through conduit, but a clear path to get to your home.
How does this all concur with the overall policy that both state and Windham Regional and towns that we try to concentrate in our existing village centers? I mean, that's part of our land use, our energy planning, is that we want to have a much greater concentration actually in the existing core villages. And the whole concept here of supplying high-speed internet to rural areas that are 2 miles or 3 miles, whatever, out for 1 or 2 residences seems to run contrary to that to me. I would think we'd want to encourage people to maybe have good service available in the actual villages, but not subsidize the very rural areas.
I'll feel that. Yeah, there is a I guess what's the term, moral hazard here for running fiber everywhere. But the fact is, we already have people who are demanding it, including school children who are relying on internet access now to do their homework, people who are doing telemedicine who may be in that house that they've lived in 5 generations at the end of a class 3 town road, or even a class, well, I don't know if we're going to class 4s or not, we'll talk about that later. Like you say, where the poles are. But we've got a lot of people who already live where they live who need access. Now, the bigger issue, frankly, as far as really achieving compact settlement, has more to do with like water, wastewater, other infrastructure. Because right now, the path of least resistance is out class 3 town roads. And that's not going to be fiber that drives people out into the class 3 town roads. It's going to be that you have no capacity in the villages to actually add additional housing units or add any commercial space. And you can't necessarily send everybody to the downtown. So we're talking future land use patterns. We're not talking about uprooting everybody in rural areas and sending them to the villages. But this is just as essential as copper telephone or electricity used to be. I can tell you that growing up as a kid, I grew up in rural Appalachia, and I go to my family's home in the rural Mississippi Delta, and they had cable before we did. In part because they recognized the need related to human health and well-being, and we're kind of at that point now with high-speed broadband. So that's the answer I can give you. Yes, sir.
Carol, thank you for coming to Windham in the past. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, there are member towns in the EC Fiber District that are well cabled. They're members of the Communication Union District, but you're not putting fiber there now because they're served by the existing cable. And you're putting your resources to the towns that don't have cable or anything else. So in Windham, we have Brattleboro and some other big towns. So are we going to take the same approach here, where we're going to try to connect the underserved to the unserved and wait, as you were doing at EC Fiber, before you tackle the cable towns like Brattleboro, for example? Is that the plan?
That would be a plan that the district will decide upon. But yes, that's the goal from a state perspective, to go to the unserved, underserved area. Let's just call them unserved, right? Because really, if you don't have cable connection or fiber connection, you're pretty unserved, no matter what other kind of connection you might have, with the exception of a few wireless connections that are very good, but not universal. And so all the unserved areas are needed first, and that's part of the purpose of the feasibility planning from the state level, as well as any funding from the state level to start up a district. And so that the focus will be on those areas first. EC Fiber does go through some cabled areas. We just had to connect our network in West Windsor to our network in Barnard, and we go right through Woodstock. Woodstock's one of our towns, and you can be sure there's a lot of cable along those routes. But that isn't our priority at this moment in time. Outside of that infrastructure need, that's what we've built in Woodstock at this moment in time. And even then, if you look at the route, it's not like straight down from Barnard to West Windsor. It kind of follows this unusual path, and if you look at that path is, the dirt roads, the edges of town, and so on to get to West Windsor.
And later on, we're going to talk about communications union districts, but what she said is important. It's going to be the districts that determine the strategy. It's not, and then whatever company, whoever you hire to actually do the technical work. And so that's important. The communities are going to be in charge of the prioritization.
I do want to say one thing about the communication union districts here, though, because through this feasibility study, we're going to be able to determine critical mass. And what does it take, and how many towns need to be part of a district? What is the logical arrangement of towns to be in districts? All of that would be recommendations. We're not going to force a town to do anything, of course. And it may be one big district, which is really something they're thinking about in the Northeast Kingdom. They're thinking about 2, and recently they've started talking about maybe even 1. So we will be looking at that as part of our study. What makes the most sense for where communication, what towns should belong to what districts, or should it be 1 district or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? But we need to make sure we have critical mass in each district in order to be feasible.
Let's take a question from Peter, he's had his hand, and then we'll go back into the presentation. We'll be plenty of opportunities to ask questions.
For the survey, what type of population percentage would constitute a valid survey?
I'd like to see 30%.
Okay.
And I'll just note one thing, as we go through this process, that's the main thing we really need the towns to think about right now, is you know your town's best, you know your community's best. So what is the best way to reach as many people in your community as possible to get surveys out and get surveys back? You're the experts on that, not us standing here. And so that when we're going to talk about what we're going to rely on the towns to do. But that's where, as far as energy and effort right now, that's where your heads need to be at, and like your broadband committees and other things. How do you get the surveys out and get them back? Charlie's a quick.
Real quick, are there any model surveys?
Oh, yeah.
We got lots of model surveys. So remember, February 6th, we're going to be having another meeting to go over what's in the surveys. We're going to be soliciting your input for the surveys, and we're going to want towns to share your thoughts on how you're going to reach out to your people, so you might give some ideas to other towns. So we're going to have a whole training around the surveys, but there are models out the, yes, Wazoo. Go ahead.
Great, so we're going to move on. The last thing I'll say about this feasibility study is that we will also be submitting it to a reputable third party to validate it and make sure that they agree with our conclusions. So just wanted to make sure you knew that as we moved on. You wanna, yeah, I'll be over this.
Okay, so the feasibility study goes back to the state. This is part of this whole grant process. So the grant is divided into two sections. One section to do the feasibility study, and the next section to do business planning. And so the feasibility study has to show that it's feasible before they will fund the business planning piece. Right? So the study goes back to the state, whether we show one district is being feasible or two districts, whatever that looks like in the end, we'll go back to the state for review and to Rob's group, and they will determine whether or not we can continue down the path and do business planning. And you'll see some of this in the timeline at the end here, because they want to look at these very quickly as well. There are 3 VIG grants out there, so they'll be getting at least 3 feasibility studies back, and then we can continue and do probably a better business planning process, a more in-depth business planning process. One of the essential elements for a business plan is who is going to operate this network. And that hasn't been determined yet. And so we'll be looking at that in feasibility. We'll be looking at it in business planning. It could be a private for-profit entity. It could be a not-for-profit entity, like ValleyNet is a not-for-profit. But we want to make sure that we find out what, we want some ideas about what that will look like, because that will affect the business plan. So ValleyNet is a not-for-profit. Our costs are very low to our districts, but a for-profit company might be different. And so we want to try and outline that and get that done very quickly if we can. We don't have to choose one, we just have to have an idea of what that would look like if we chose a for-profit company.
And we don't know the exact dates yet, but we'll be reporting this back to you.
Quick question, is the business plan done at the recommended CUD level, or is that done at the regional level as well?
Well, it'll be at the CUD level, but it will be for each CUD.
When you say for each CUD, ones that are already talking about forming, or what some possible configurations are based on the feasibility study?
We'll work with those that are already going to, that have it on their ballot for the town meeting, because they'll form a core CUD. But what we'll try and determine is how the other towns relate to that, and determine how many. We'll make a recommendation as to how many should be in which CUD or in one.
Keep it coming.
Okay, I'm trying.
Yeah. So if your recommendation is 3 CUDs, you're going to do a separate business plan for each?
Yes.
And that's why we stressed in the communication about this. Wherever you are in your CUD process right now, I know a lot of the town warning, were printed, a month ago or before. You're fine wherever you're at right now, right, Carol? Because the whole point of this is to figure out the geography, based on the technology, the geography, what CUDs make sense. And we're not going to dictate that either. I mean, if other group, we don't have the power, we don't have the desire to say, you don't do that. Towns can do whatever they want to do. But what we're going to advise is based on the feasibility analysis for the region as a whole, for this 920 square mile, 27 town region, how many CUDs make sense so that we can serve the unserved. Does that make sense?
How many make sense regardless of how many have actually formed?
The result is going to be a business plan that you could take to possibly get the revenue bonds to help start building the network.
Speak up, say that again.
Oh no.
Stand up.
So one of the results of this business plan is going to be something that you can take to lenders to get the funding you need to build out the network.
Right, yes.
Would this be a partial solution to areas that do not have cell phone service to connect through a Google Voice, Skype, but internet and telephone? Because I guess in our area, our biggest concern is we have so little cell service, but would this be able to serve through internet phone services?
So most of these, the results for service will include probably a voice over IP plan, but more importantly, almost every cell phone now is network capable. And so it's bringing in enough bandwidth into your home to be able to connect your cell phone to your network and use it in your home. That doesn't help when you're stuck on the road.
Well,
that's sort of another type of solution, but what will happen is there'll be fiber throughout the region, right? And that gives easy access to those providers to connect into a network. There'll be fiber available if AT&T or Verizon or US Cellular or some other carrier wanted to put up repeaters or cell towers or mini towers, which a number of them would like to do, then there'll be that opportunity to do that because that fiber will be there already.
Is that happening in EC fiber area? Is AT&T building out because of the work you've done?
Yes and no. We're not providing them backhaul, but they do have the CCI, for the most part, is providing backhaul to them. But yes, there are dead spots within our region, and we all know what happened when the provider left Coverage Co., right? So there are areas within our EC fiber territory that also doesn't have cell service. They're working on that as a district, but it's hard to encourage a cell tower to do that. I can tell you that you can put a device in your home that will bleed out, if you want to call it that. So you can there's a device in your home for both Verizon and AT&T that will allow you to, it's like a mini cell tower. It's not even a tower, it just looks like a modem device. I used to have one in Royalton. And others on our staff had them as well. And they would say people would stop across the street from their house because they had a signal. So you get priority on that device, but the signal actually goes out further and it is secure in that your conversations and it isn't interrupted by somebody else's. But you can start to do that within some towns as well, particularly in downtown areas. So there are some solutions there, but really we need the big providers to participate.
Is this going to be competitive with cable and cell?
In terms of pricing structures?
In terms of content? Yes, and pricing.
Yes, it will. Product pricing will be competitive with those services, and it will offer you some alternatives where they are existing if you build out over those cabled areas. We're experiencing a 17% take rate in cabled areas versus 30 to 40% take rate within 2 years in non-cabled areas. So you have to keep that in mind.
I'm sorry, you said, did you say sync rate?
17% take rate.
Take rate, oh, okay,
Take rate
sorry.
in cabled areas. So as much as you don't like Comcast or whoever your cable provider is today, turning that off is a hard decision, and learning how to stream is difficult, but people are doing it.
I'm having help me understand, do we figure out whether we want to be the town of Weston, 500, 400 earnest, wonderful souls? Do we decide, do we do our survey first, or do we decide to do a CUD first? How's this going to work for us?
You don't need to participate in the CUD to do your survey. Okay, so the more survey results that we can get in from the various towns, the better our data will be, the better our recommendations will be. And what was I going to say? That you want towns, though, to provide a representative.
Right, so,
You're going to take care of that?
yes.
Okay.
You want, are we there?
No, we're not there yet. We didn't. Okay.
Do you want to cover that?
Let's go through this one.
Okay. Well, let's continue with the presentation a bit more, and then we'll get into that.
So the business plan includes a market analysis, a high-level market analysis. It includes high-level engineering and design plans. It does not include having done that. That's a cost in itself to do that. But we have a lot of experience and can do a high-level plan. Financing models, at least 3 years of projected pro forma projections. Estimation of construction costs. Valiant has a really good handle on that in the state of Vermont. We're building, as I said, we're very close to over 1,100 miles of fiber now, and we'll be at 1,400 very soon. Like operational models, what are the choices to have an operator or a construction management operator? What will those choices look like? Who wants to participate? We will have contacted some of those companies to see if they're interested in doing that. We have to provide a risk management plan. So this is a business plan that you can take to the state for VITA financing. That's the goal. So you have a business plan, the VITA financing for the startup CUDs. That plan should be sufficient enough to take to the state for that purpose.
Hi, everybody. My name's Rob Fish. I work for the Public Service Department, and I've met many of you already. I'm the person the state has hired to try to connect all the different groups in the state that are working on broadband. So I'm going to talk a little bit about communication union districts. A lot of it's been covered already in the questions, and I'm sure there's going to be more. So tell me to slow down if you need me to. So first off, as you've probably figured out already, a communications union district is a way for 2 or more towns to work together to provide a solution to our lack of broadband. So how many towns here are part of a sewer district or a solid waste district? You get the concept. So why would you want to create a communication union district? The same reason for any of those other districts. What do you gain by working together? You're able to aggregate demand. You'll be able to get to a point where you have a better business case to make to get a better deal from a provider. It's also a way that the entire region can benefit. Otherwise, each town has a different business case. Towns that are less dense are less likely to be served. This is a way for the entire region to benefit. Another reason, funders are familiar with municipal districts. So a lot of the funding is going to be coming from VITA or from USDA. Do you think they want to get 28 different applications for a small project, or have one body that is coordinating that effort?
Rob, could you tell them real quick who VITA is?
VITA is the Vermont Economic Development Authority. They have a broadband expansion loan as of this year that's up to $4 million per loan. So it's not necessarily bridge funding, but it's more startup funding. Okay. So to turn that around the other way, how many of your towns want to apply to USDA for individual funding and compete against all of your neighbors? So efficiency, when you're looking at an entire region, you can build out the network in the most efficient way possible. And town boundaries are irrelevant. How many roads go from one town through 4 other towns? What are the settlement patterns? What is the topography of your area? That's more important than town boundaries. And working as a region allows you to maximize the efficiencies that that gains. Risk mitigation, individual towns are not on the hook. Funding opportunities and just not reinventing the wheel. EC Fiber pioneered a model that is working. Around the state, this is working. So this is a way to benefit from that rather than taking everything on as an individual town. People pose a few questions that I'm sure are coming of how many towns should be in a CUD? This varies, and thankfully there's a feasibility study that's going to look at what the best makeup is for the towns here. As Carol mentioned earlier, in the Northeast Kingdom, they were considering doing 2 communication union districts. Now they're going to do 1. That could potentially be 50 towns. So there's a lot of different factors to consider when it comes into it, but it also considers how many towns do you want to be looking at across the room. Like there are models of executive committees and everything, but it's finding that balance. Cost to the taxpayers in the town. To just say it bluntly, communication union districts, they can't tax the residents of a town. Any funding for any of these build-outs is going to come from revenue bonds or possibly from private funding. How does the town join a CUD? How many people here are representing towns that are already voting at town meeting? There's quite a few already. There's a Deerfield Valley CUD that's forming, and then in Bennington County, there's about 10 towns that are already voting. If you didn't get it on the ballot, no big deal. Once the CUD is formed, you can join the CUD by just a simple select board vote. It doesn't take a town meeting vote to join an existing CUD. So this is the language. It's a little bit past the deadline for being able to put something on town meeting, but it's all spelled out in law. And it's based on an existing model. There's existing bylaws in place. There's suggestions, and a lot of it's figured out with this model. So I know I went really quick through that, but any questions?
Can we go back 1 slide?
Sure.
And by the way, this presentation is going to be on VCTV, but we'll also have it on the Windham Regional Commission website. You'll see it right there on the home page.
I can also email this language to anybody.
What are the outer geographic parameters for a local CUD? Could somebody in Guilford join a CUD in St. Johnsbury?
Well, it's the entire town, but yes, technically St. Johnsbury could join with a CUD in Windham County.
Right, so
there's not a restriction.
That's the point that I'm saying.
Logistics.
Is that once you have a CUD formed someplace, the town could join. You can always join a CUD.
You can apply to join. That's the key.
The existing CUD would have to bring it to their governing board for a vote. One of the issues that EC Fiber had initially was West Windsor was part of our communication union district. Getting there meant that we had to connect them to us in an unusual way initially. Montpelier is supposed to be part of ours as well as CD Fiber. They belong to 2 CUDs. By getting to, if we were to build Montpelier, we'd have to have a link directly from Montpelier back to Royalton. So they need a link from St. Johnsbury to your town in order to make that happen. More importantly is if you have problems, how far do you want that truck to roll? So an hour, 2 hours? I think that's one of the important pieces there.
So the towns don't have to be contiguous. They can also cross boundaries. You could also look to Massachusetts, New York, New Hampshire. A lot of different options, but there are logistical concerns. Fair.
Is it actually true that we are past the deadline for including including an article on the town meeting ballot? My understanding is that we're close to the deadline, but not there now.
Yeah, I think it's very close. I think it's a 30-day warning is the minimum.
And 40 is the maximum.
Yeah, so it really varies. a little bit from
So
town to
there is
town.
time for any town
Yes,
that will be
there is.
considering an article to get it on their meeting agenda for this year.
Yes, correct. Yeah, you still have time.
But just, and not discouraging you from doing that, but for those of you who haven't, for your towns that haven't contemplated it yet, that's fine too. So that's why
I brought it up because I know that there's at least one town here that is considering
Yeah.
whether to do so and was going to decide after this meeting.
Yeah, and that's great. But I just want everybody to, you're fine wherever you're at, whatever your town wants to do, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, really what the most important thing right now is this survey of getting these results back to this group to come up with a feasibility study and ideally come up with a business plan after that.
I guess that's kind of the plea. I mean, if your town has limited bandwidth, no pun intended, sorry, it was not intended, I really did not mean that. But if you've got limited capacity to make decisions right now, focus on how to administer the surveys, not so much on necessarily on the CUD right now. Because and this is going to be, this is a 6-month process. It's going to roll fast because that's what the grant that we have requires. And so the only thing that's going to extend that 6 months is the amount of time that it takes the Public Service Department to review the feasibility study. And so that's why when we have that second meeting on February 6th about the survey, we're going to need towns and everybody to act fast. So again, if you have limited time to talk about this in your town, talk about the survey.
And using town meeting as an opportunity to collect survey results is going to be key, whether you're voting on it or not.
Yeah.
So I certainly hear the interest in having participating communities get involved with the survey. I'm hearing that loud and clear. I've got a couple of assumptions, I think, about the survey, but I'd like to make sure that those assumptions are correct or find out that they're incorrect. My assumption is to facilitate demand aggregation, you are going to be wanting each community to be distributing the same survey, is that correct? Okay. And for the purpose
Somebody
of...
say that out loud?
Yes.
Thank you.
And for the purpose of facilitating and aggregating demand, I'm guessing if there's going to be a web-based survey tool, that would be available to all participating towns. Is that correct?
Yep.
And that the regional commission would likely make that available, that we could all sort of link to or something along those lines?
It's probably going to be more through I mean, rural areas.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Okay.
One thing to emphasize about the web version is like you want to have paper versions too.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we get the people.
And we're going to take a deeper dive on this on February 6th, is that right?
Yes.
Outstanding.
They're going to be due when?
I think that you look at the timeline at the end, I think we're looking at the third week in March.
But fell on the orange flag.
Do these CUDs have to be contiguous areas?
No.
And a related question, are multiple connections to a backbone provider possible?
Yes.
I have questions on the feasibility study, particularly the first 3 things you wrote down, the take rate survey, analysis of served and underserved areas, and the bandwidth needs. We're all underserved, technically. So the question is, what is the what's the aim? What's the goal? Are we talking that the goal is 1 gig for everybody? Are we talking that because everyone's underserved? The take rate survey is going to be based on, gee, what I'd like, and when I don't even know what I need, it seems to me to be a problem. And bandwidth needs, particularly, what we said, I mean, right now, the federal 25.4 is inadequate for anything, right, beyond really one household. So how do we use this survey effectively to get to a place where we need to get to, which is a 1 gig or get fiber optic to everybody when they don't know what they need?
the construction of a network today would include all the equipment being at least 1 gig capable and 10 gig on the backbone side. So on the side that connects all the hubs together would be more like 10, and out to the internet would probably be more than that. And so part of what we would expect is that the broadband deployed will be up to a gig. And so
Up and down?
Up and down, symmetrical. So as a district, and through this, as we do business planning, we'll probably look at different tiers of offering, and that's part of the survey as well. Meaning a 25.3 tier would be the very lowest basic level. That is what the FCC says is broadband today. You and I don't agree with that. I understand that, but that's the minimum. And then probably tiers taking you to a gig at different price points.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? Because that's something I've never quite understood. The tiering, that's artificial, right? Because you could provide 1 gig up and down for the same cost to everyone. So that's simply a marketing decision about what we'll charge for everybody. But it could be 1 gig to everybody at the same cost.
That's correct. If the business plan allowed for that, to say, quote, in order to offer 1 gig to everybody, this is the price we would have to charge. How many? Now that may reduce how many people actually sign up. So
why would it cost more?
By offering different tiers, people can sign in at various levels.
My question is, why would providing 1 gig up and down cost you more than providing 100?
On the backhaul.
What other people charge?
Yes, so we have to buy service out of the area to a major carrier, right? And that will depend on how much bandwidth is being used internally. So if everybody has a gig and everybody uses 700 meg, that backhaul is going to be a whole lot more expensive than if it's tiered. If the business plan allows for that, that is what some municipal networks across the country are doing. They're offering a gig, one price, $50, $75, $100, whatever it happens to be, across the board. So it's possible. We'll take a look at that.
I'm just concerned that the survey is a little too small or not comprehensive enough to really get us there. We know that, just one quick one, we know that, for example, in Chesterfield, New Hampshire, the data was inaccurate from the coverage, so the man who was in charge, who was putting it, went to everybody and found, okay, theoretically they had 100 gig, but they didn't because they had no service at all. But the map said they did.
Right.
So
if you look
the
at
survey,
the FCC maps, you're probably all covered.
the survey is going to have to be comprehensive enough to really understand the area.
So remember where we're starting from. We're administering surveys that have been used in how many towns, and where this has been done, how many places now?
Several places here in Vermont, but also in New Hampshire. And we the third partner on another grant that we're working on deals with, it's called CTG Communications out of Maryland. And so they've provided us with some survey material as well.
So it's not like we're starting from scratch, our partners know what we need to gather from the surveys.
It's really to try and determine who's interested in it, who would take service at what price points. That's the main purpose of the survey.
Let me ask that we do this. So we're about at the end of the presentation, and then we're just going to open it wide open for questions.
All right, so you folks are asking about the survey and what you need to do. If you saw the invitation to tonight's meeting, you saw that you saw the first things that we're asking you to do. We want each town to decide if they want to participate. Of course, it's up to you. We hope you will all participate. And we are asking your select board to pass a simple resolution stating that. We're also asking them to identify one specific person to be the broadband point of contact for your town.
And let me just clarify, I can already see the hand going up. We're talking about participating in the study.
Right. I need you to tell us what you mean by participating.
Okay, yep.
Participate, set up a CUD, yes, we're all in on
No.
broadband, or yes, we want to do a survey.
So first, yes, we're all in on broadband. Second,
No.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Help me.
Yes, we're all in on this effort to be involved in the project.
Which is a survey.
Which is the feasibility and plan.
And the feasibility study and the business plan
Whoa,
development.
whoa, whoa. But if you do a survey and you decide it's not feasible, you don't want to do it.
That's true. That will be the
Right.
end.
Exactly.
Correct. Absolutely. And we hope that as many of you as possible will participate throughout the process. We'll be holding multiple meetings, as Chris mentioned. The next one being the February 6th meeting that will focus on the survey. But once we complete the survey, we'll have a meeting to share the results with you, and we'll also be sharing information about the feasibility study. And if it is decided to go ahead with the business plan, we'll do that as well. But we just want to have one contact person that we know we can reach out to. We have their email address, can send them information, they can get it on your website, whatever is needed to be done. And we are asking you just to send that information to me in an email, and my address is swest@windhamregional.org. So that's just the first thing. The survey meeting is the second thing, and you've heard a lot already about the help that we need from you on that survey. You want to talk about it?
If you want, yeah. Oh, I don't know. Sure. We've talked about the survey a lot. I guess the only other thing I would add is that we need to do the survey right the first time, right? We can't survey everyone multiple times, and thankfully we've got really experienced partners who have done these surveys before. They know exactly what we need to ask, and so it's a robust survey, which means we'll need all of your help making sure people fill it out, right? It's going to be definitely longer than a page, and so this is really the important foundation to everything else we do. So happy to take more questions about that at the end, but there is going to be a special meeting about it as well on February.
And it will be one survey. We need the same survey to go out to all of the towns.
And we will help as much as we can with disseminating it, providing links, language for the listservs, physical copies, organizing groups to make sure we get as many responses as possible.
Let me just underscore why we need the resolution by the select board. It's just, we're a political subdivision of the state. We work with towns that they request for us to work with them. We don't just jump in from above. So we're not, so if a town doesn't, the reality is that the select board says we don't want to participate, and remember, it's just participating in the study. You're not committing to any CUD or business plan or anything else. You're just committing to, yes, we want to participate in getting out the study and being part of the discussions about what the feasibility study finds and discussions about what the business plan suggests. But we just need the select board to say, yes, we want to participate, because otherwise, if we were just show up in a town and start surveying residents, the towns would probably say, why are you here? We didn't ask to be a part of this. And so basically it's our way of getting permission from the select board, from your legislative body, saying thumbs up, and here's our primary point of contact. Why the primary point of contact? Because it's really difficult when you're expected to communicate the same thing to 5, 6, 20 different people. And so the idea is to communicate to one person who can then disseminate that back out to the rest of the town. Whatever network you have in your town to do that is fine. So if from that one person, they then communicate to 1,000, that's fine. However you want to do it internally, it doesn't make any difference. But we just need that kind of the select board official point of contact so that we know who to reach out to.
And isn't it true that the meetings aren't just for that point of contact?
Absolutely.
You can
Right.
bring alternates, you can bring whoever you need to from your town to the meetings. All of that is fine. It's just that there should be one official point of contact.
Yep. Okay, a couple questions?
Yeah, we've heard that landlines are kind of in peril. Do you know anything about that? Are they likely to disappear like I
Hey,
might
Peter,
see
before
on-
that, can we, before we get into the peril of landline, let's finish the,
Okay, real quick, what can you expect from Windham Regional? Our role in this project is really as conveners and communicators, as we often are, to all of our communities, a role we often play. We'll be leading the survey development. We will be able to meet with some towns individually if that's really necessary, but we're really hoping to use these regional meetings to disseminate this information. So hopefully, you'll be able to come to these meetings and bring that information back out to your towns. And then we'll wrap up with the timeline.
So the state says 6 months, right? 6 months from the day that we signed the agreement.
which was last Monday. One of the reasons why you didn't hear from us was we didn't even have a contract to do this until last Monday.
So the broadband survey training for the towns on February 6th. We'd like the survey information all complete by March 17th so that we can be compiling that information. A feasibility study should be complete by the end of April. And then the business plan will take about 2 to 3 months following approval by the Vermont DPS on the feasibility study. So we're looking at, if all goes well, sometime by midsummer, I was going to say mid to late summer, we should have, plans in place and be ready to rock and roll and move things forward.
Can I ask how large is the grant that the regional received from the state?
Just under 60,000.
Just under 60,000.
60,000.
And the majority of it's going to them because they're doing all the technical work. We're actually basically going to get just reimbursed for Susan and my time. So we're getting like 5,000, I think it is. But that's the total. And then they're actually putting a lot of, you want to say something about the USDA grant that you guys have that kind of helps set the foundation for this?
So we also have a grant that, as I told you about, our partners in Maryland, that allows us to do some like pre-feasibility types of communication and planning and development of surveys and so on for both Vermont, 2 regions in Vermont and 2 regions in New Hampshire. The other 2 regions, by the way, are Pine Bluff, Arkansas, no idea, and Western Maryland. So it covers these 6 regions. But the idea is to create these models that can inform other communities in other states about how to do this. And so that's the purpose of that grant. But there's there's three of us working together to make that happen, all bringing different experience to the table. So we have this great wealth of knowledge that we have available to us.
What's the timeline for putting those models together?
That's a different grant, and I think it's 2 years. Yeah.
And
Do you anticipate that the survey questions will let folks decide the level at which they would be willing to step into this as an uptake? And if that's the case, in the communities that have income levels that are at or below state averages, which are pretty low, I'm anticipating that we would get a lot of folks who might take the basic but unable to get too much. Will that have anything at all to do with the level of technology that is rolled out? So theoretically, that means, I heard a no there. So somebody on a given street, and all the folks on that street basically signed up to say they would take the basic, and enough of them do. But those same people could then, if they all of a sudden win the lottery, could upgrade, and the technology will be there for them to go all the way up to the top.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so if you use EC Fiber as an example, those customers can call any day of the week and say, I need more service, please increase my service, or I no longer need as much service because my children have all gone to college and they're not home anymore, and so could you reduce it? There's no contracts. They allow them to do that and prorate the month in doing that. We have a lot of customers, not a lot, about 25 or 30 who call us before Thanksgiving and call us back in January because all their family is coming home for Thanksgiving and they need to far more bandwidth during that time period.
Just to Ann's question, correct me if I'm wrong, the pipe, the fiber cable that's going to go to everyone's house is the same. It's how much the CUD or the company, whoever it is, pushes through that pipe. So, right, is that a fair statement?
Not only the pipe, but the device in the home is going to be the same.
Right.
The device on the pole is going to be the same. The device in the cabinet, hub cabinet is going to be the same. And it's all depends on how it's provisioned. So we can provision you for 25, 100, 100. I think EC Fiber is just out. So it's 25, 25, 200, 200. I think it's 400 and then now 800.
Okay, the pipe is the same as
The pipe
everyone's
is the
house.
same.
It's just how much you bring in from the internet to give to the customer.
Right. We provision each device for whatever they purchase.
And as she is saying, again, maybe this is clear to everybody, but just in case, and I'm partially saying this to make sure I understand it, it's kind of like whoever the provider is, as part of the business plan, they're buying that backhaul to where you're actually connecting to the internet. And so that's what's the cost driver as far as how much it's going to cost you, whether you got the 1 gig or whatever package you get. It's not the local service provider who's making the money. It's or who's driving the cost. It's more on what that backhaul cost is. Is that right?
Now, the local network is going to be what the market will bear, right? And I think that, but the equipment will be to allow for at least a gigabit of service.
Just a question on the survey. So you mentioned the other group that you're part of, Brattleboro being one of the beneficiary areas of that. So we already have a sampling of the survey that you folks provided. One thing I noticed about the questions that we received is a lot of it was about current usage for people. It didn't really talk about what people were willing to do or what people wanted to do. And it seems like there should be more questions about that. And the reason I say that is because if you're surveying people in a town that's unserved, then obviously their usage is pretty low. It doesn't, so we don't really know what they want compared to what they actually are getting now.
That's a good point.
So I think what I'm hearing in a couple of different places is, does the survey educate respondents on what the possibilities are, as well as asking what they do? Because there's so many people, I mean, I've tried for 4 years to get internet on our road, and I've had to have conversations over and over again with people who don't know what they're missing or how their bills would differ if they had fiber instead of 3 megabytes going down or down up. So there's a whole education process for people who aren't really aware of the possibilities or the necessities.
And I think it's important to note that this is the first step. Driving demand is going to be something that the CUD is going to have to figure out, of teaching people how to use the additional bandwidth that's available.
And the survey is just a piece of the pie for this feasibility, right? We need to know things like roads and household income, and there are other pieces of that pie. How big of a network it is, how many premises, what's the likelihood of a rural town, how many miles out of town do the roads go, and so on and so forth. So there's a number of pieces to that. This is just a piece of that feasibility study.
And as she noted earlier, we've already gotten them, Windham Regional's already gotten them that information.
More hands keep coming up. What's going on? Are we supposed to be answering questions?
Education.
True.
Go ahead.
We live in Vernon, and we are well served. We are one of those people. A couple of years ago, we had a fiber optics subcommittee, and we did a survey. We reached out to Guilford. Sheila can tell you that. And we learned about CUDs. We did a survey. We got that many, 4 responses, because like Sheila just said, even though we are well served, people don't know what they're missing, even with Comcast and now Consolidated, which used to be Fairpoint. And not only that, because the plant has left or is closed and a lot of people left, we are now getting an influx of newer residents who are younger, who need this technology. So I second the idea of the education component of this survey. And it's not easy, because we have some people who just don't know, and they don't know what they don't know.
No, I agree with you. And I think we'll all do the best we can to do that during this survey period. As someone mentioned here, they've done it a number of times on their road and had to repeat it over and over again. But that is a concern that we have, is you don't know what you're missing.
How about, I have 3 quick questions. One going back to Rob, and maybe I just missed it, but I think I missed both of these. But the go back again over the funding options. You know, we can't tax, but you said you can use other means, but I guess
Sure.
fine.
Sure. So whether you're an individual town or whether you're a communication district, any build out of a network has to be funded from the revenues or projected revenues from the project. But you are also allowed to accept grants.
Or private funding?
Or private funding, yes.
Or private funding, or RUS loans where they're willing to work with you on that.
Yeah. But the point is that a CUD can't tax your residents.
So we're gonna do Steve Munson and the fellow in the orange flag.
So Carol, is there a correlation? You said you raised $7 million and we're happy to have done 225 miles. Is there a direct correlation between $7 million and 225 miles?
No, some of that $7 million was for building beyond the 225 miles.
Is there a correlation between the 7,500 subscribers that you're looking for and $7 million?
Well, no. But I can tell you that our rule of thumb at ValleyNet for Vermont has been $30,000 a mile, which includes 6 drops, meaning 6 houses, the equipment going to 6 houses. And that has held true for the last 7 years.
And just coincidentally, the numbers you gave us was 31,000 a mile. And if you take 7,500 and divide that by the 7 million by 7,500, it's $933 per person. So, how if you want to do it? That's all in favor of that.
So, yeah. So it's but that that's held true for us, and even with the changes and poll make ready work and all that. So, if anything, that access to the polls, with the changes taking place this year in the legislation for that process at the DPS, it's perhaps those costs might come down a bit, but it's been fairly stable, a little higher, a little lower. The guy at the end of the road, I say 6 drops in a mile. Well, sometimes there's not 6 houses in a mile, but in town there's 30 houses in a mile. So it all averages out.
Munson?
Yeah, my question really lies, probably not to you guys. The state of Vermont has in its wisdom said that essential services such as internet cannot be funded by municipal bonds, but have to be revenue bonds. In New Hampshire, again, where Chesterfield successfully is putting together something, they're allowed to use municipal bonding on the assumption that an essential service like a bridge or a road shouldn't be required to pay for itself, but there are other ways of doing it. Do you foresee any chance for either towns getting waivers if they can prove that they are financially capable of handling it, or getting a change in the law? Because it seems right now that the state is being somewhat paternal and protecting us from ourselves from making the horrible mistake of spending the money the way we might want it. And I wonder if there is any chance that methods of funding may change.
Are there any representatives or senators in the room? That's who you should talk to. There was just a report that looked at a lot of these issues, and it was determined that we need to wait and see how the current mechanisms work. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a change in the future. It just means now, in order to protect taxpayers, you can't put your grand list up to fund a broadband build-out. You can use those types of funds for the part of a broadband build-out that's specific to municipal uses. That's the one little thing in there where there might be some room, but that's something for every town to address with their town attorney.
Just to
I'm
give
not a
everybody-
lawyer.
Just to give everybody a chance.
Follow up. There's just one quick, there's a way around that, which the town can buy their own bonds. In other words, a town in Utah did that. They sold the bonds, then they realized that the bonds were getting a whole higher amount of money than they were, so they bought their own bonds and became the owners.
So first we have the fellow in the orange plaid, then Ann, and then we'll come back over this way. Okay. Fellow in orange plaid. Sorry, what's your name, by the way?
Chris Robbins.
Nice to meet you.
Am I right in assuming that the different pricing tiers are going to be sensitive to aggregate bandwidth demand within the CUD? So if everybody in our town wants just basic service, the cost to build out has to be amortized over something. Would our price tiers for basic service be higher than if everybody wanted?
The business model of EC Fiber, it used to be that about 70% took basic and 20% took standard and 10% took everything above that. Today, it's 50% who take basic. You see that there's this great need going on, and another about 30% take standard, which is the next level up, and then about 15 or 25, I'm out of percentages here, but the rest of them take the higher level services. So the business model works on the bulk of the premises taking a basic or standard service.
Ann?
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that the limitations against using municipal bonds and using only the funding sources that were provided in the legislation only applies to communication unions districts. If a municipality itself chose to run a broadband within their town, are they prevented from? I mean, we do have a municipal model, the Chesterfield one, for example, but Burlington Telecom is a municipal model.
I think that's one of the reasons why there's restrictions on the use of general funds. I wasn't around in that history, just to say, but I'm thinking that that's where it came from. But
It is true in New Hampshire, they can use general obligation bonds, but they can only use general obligation bonds to build those areas that are unserved today.
Well, yes, that's
They can't use it to build overbuild anything, any areas that are served. And the reason it's become popular is because CCI has come to the table with plans that pay those bonds with a small access fee, $10 or $11.50, something like that, a month until the bonds are paid back. And now, you know, if you think about that model, the first 4 years, as you're ramping up service, you're not going to have enough money to pay the bond, and so they've also guaranteed that they will pay the difference between your access fees and so on. I don't think the towns in New Hampshire would be going forward with general obligation bonds if there wasn't a way of paying that back that didn't rest on the shoulders of the taxpayers.
But my question that was about Vermont specifically is whether the prohibition against using them is only directed at CUDs.
No, it's everything.
It's everything. The law prevents it everywhere.
Andy?
Now, having said that, if you look at West Windsor, in the EC Fiber district, they actually provided some funding to build part of their town. They provided the funding to connect all their municipal buildings together, and then they leased that network to EC Fiber when it built the rest of the town.
And they did that with general obligation.
But that was specifically to connect all of their town premises together.
Andy? And then we'll go to the...
Okay. I guess what I want to clarify, what we're talking about here would not involve any content cable content. This is strictly internet and voice over internet.
Unless, in response to an RFP, a carrier came back and said, we'll help you build your town. In addition to that, we'll offer broadband, and then on us, we'll offer voice over IP and streaming services.
Okay, well, based on that assumption, what advantages other than municipal revenue bond financing, which would be cheaper than commercial financing, does going with the CUD have, seeing it has to be provided by subscriber fees, over existing providers that are providing both internet and cable services over the same pipeline?
They're not willing to go the last mile.
So it's a subsidy from congested areas to more rural areas. That's really what we're talking about.
You may partner with an existing carrier, and we'll have to work out the funding of how to build that out. They've decided that this is where they are, and they're not going to go any further based on houses per mile and based on their return on investment. So if you subsidize that next step, they might be willing to do that.
You can certainly try for cable line extension. It's a process, and in general, most of Vermont is built out to the extent that Comcast or Charter is going to want to build out with their business model and what profits they need to make. It's not saying it can't happen, it's just saying what it is at this point.
So we know that Comcast is looking to buy a cable company in their area, right?
Is the survey going to ask people about whether they have satellite television? Because if you're spending $100 a month on satellite TV, you're paid for your internet already. Is that part of the survey question? I think it's an important thing to know.
Yeah, it asks about what's bundled with your internet.
David Jones, Halifax.
Probably the internet?
Or
I have one question about the study and one question about the survey. The question about the study is, will you be studying the feasibility of setting up an operational affiliate like ValleyNet is to EC Fiber, as opposed to contracting with ISPs? As I understand it, ValleyNet basically buys wholesale and integrates the parts and pieces into a working product, as opposed to contracting for end-to-end service from an ISP. So will you be, the question is, will you be studying the feasibility of establishing an operational group like ValleyNet for the Windham County? And the question about the survey is, will there be included in the survey questions some indication of the ability of the respondent to pay anything? In other words, there could be some people who don't have internet because they can't afford it. Will that be, will capturing that information be part of the survey?
Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily phrase it like that, but it's, if they want to, would they want to buy internet if they don't have any? This will be part of it.
So and once it gets to a point of that you're trying to find a provider, that's certainly something you can include in your RFP. Of like, do you offer a special service for low-income individuals that are on the school lunch program or during certain things? So it really comes down to later down the line.
Get to the reason why they might or might not have service, affordability, their ability to afford it might be something to understand.
And that could also be, wouldn't that be a benefit of the CUD, is to, you're closer to your community, and so the CUD can decide what you want to do to help subsidize those who need service who don't have it. That'll be within the control of the...
Right, so we know that EC Fiber is struggling with this question as well, right? Because there are a number of individuals in their territory that can't afford the service. And so the governing board is looking at that as an issue, and they're looking at it at the potential of at what point in time do revenues start to exceed expenses, and then that's one of the options that they have to put on the table, is some sort of subsidy or lowering prices or those types of things.
Okay, and can you also answer the question about whether you're going to be studying the feasibility of setting up an operational affiliate?
You know, we can look at that, but I can tell you it's far less costly to go with somebody who already has business systems in place and customer support help desks in place, and operation systems in place. So when you add the costs of that software and hardware and the space and so on, it really would add significantly to the cost of setting up a district. So it would be better to be able to partner with an ISP that already has those services, that already has that in place, that already has a BSS and OSS, and has a help desk and so on and so forth. It would be better to do that, because the cost of starting from scratch would be high. I mean, a bucket truck alone is $100,000, just as an example.
The woman in the back?
Is that what you asked?
She hadn't asked a question, then we'll come to you.
Sorry, go ahead.
So our select board in Stratton has voted to proceed, but they would like to warn the town on town meeting day and have asked us to come back from today's meeting with a name of a CUD, which obviously listening tonight, that's not going to exist until the surveys, but we would like to warn our townspeople because we all know we're all
Deerfield Valley.
Deerfield Valley. Okay, Ann gave me my answer. Thank you, Ann. Just always a great resource. Thank you.
I just was a little confused as to what defines the 6-month project. Does that mean the end of the feasibility study, but not necessarily creating CUDs? Or what?
This is a total of 6 months. We have to be done with the business plan by the end of the 6-month period. That's under our grant with
to have everything defined within 6 months.
the whole, everything funded on this grant has to be done. Ostensibly 6 months from last Monday, whatever that was.
That's pretty ambitious. And will this PowerPoint be available online?
Yes. Steve?
I want to go back to the importance of the education of people before they take the survey. Because in order to have a valid survey, what everybody's been saying is that people have to understand what they're getting if they answer yes, no, or maybe, right? What are the supplemental materials that go, it's one thing to have a survey, but what are the supplemental materials, when somebody gets it, can we have some input as to what we're saying and say, for example, under the basic, you would be able to do this in your household. Under the standard, you would be able to do this in your household. Because we have to let people get what they want, not necessarily what they ask for. And they, out of ignorance, they won't ask for what they really want because they don't know what they want. So what are the supplemental materials that have gone out with other surveys?
Yeah, well, our particular survey is still in draft form, and all this feedback is really helpful to make sure that we get it to a good spot. But I would also say that we need to provide as much context as possible at the start of the survey and with all the materials we send out. So if it's a post on a listserv, if it's a post on social media, every single copy of the survey has to have all the context right up front so people know exactly what their responses mean, why we're doing the survey, what the results will be used for, and so appreciate the concern, and that's something we'll make sure to account for when we make the final draft.
And let me just add that another thing that we're going to be doing is, obviously, because for those of you here representing towns, you're going to want your towns represented as well as possible in this. But we're also having conversation with CORE, with BCC-TV, about how we get surveys out. One of the reasons why we're asking supervisor unions and schools to be here is to help them push the surveys out. Libraries, we're going to be trying to ask them. So, and basically any social network out there, right? And not just relying on the electronic, also paper. One of the things that we're going to, if your town has the capacity to do it itself and like hand out cards at town meeting, that would be great if you can print them yourself. If you can't, let us know. I don't think we can print 100,000. We don't have 100,000 people in the region, but anyway. But we'll work on getting cards to you for that. So then your effort, part of your effort, would be organizing somebody to stand at the door of town meeting and hand that out. And then the idea is like work with the libraries to say, hey, can you push out there that if people want to do this electronic or by paper, come to the library, or you at the town. It's like the clerk will have this on the desk at the town office, or you'll have it if you have a transfer station. you can fill it out at the transfer station, and it'll be a really pretty clean box, so you can put it in. But that's the kind of thing that we need towns to think about, but we're gonna ask other people to keep pushing this out. So it's not all on the towns, and I'm a little nervous about saying that, so you don't go, oh good, we don't have to do it. But you guys are know your neighbors best and best how to get that out.
I actually have a question about the survey.
Sure.
Just step over here for a second. So what about part-time residents? I know a lot of the towns have seasonal residents. How do you suggest reaching those, and how will those results be accounted for?
One way to do it that we've done throughout other areas is to take from your grand list who you send the tax bill to, and send either postcards with the link to the electronic survey. That's probably the most effective, efficient, and low-cost method to have those individuals be able to complete the survey. But you all have contact with those individuals because they get a tax bill every year. And you know who they are because the tax bill doesn't go to somebody in the account.
I'm gonna go, this fellow, David Jones, Brookline, and then Peter, and then you.
My question about the seasonal homes was not so much about how you reach them, but their responses and what impacts you may have seen from other surveys that has on feasibility within a particular town.
I can estimate in a given town what proportion of the seasonal homes will take service. I mean, in the EC fiber territory, there is about, I think it's about 30% of the homes are second homes that have service. And they are those are the people who really want it the most because they want to come up here and stay longer than what they were able to stay before. And that's good for the state, right? So they come on Thursday night and stay Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday instead of just the weekend, or extended stays during the summer months. And the longer they're here, the more they spend. And so I think it's good for all of us. But those individuals are so accustomed to having great service, usually in their densely populated areas that they live in, that when they come here, one would think, oh, some people say, well, maybe they don't want any service at all. I'm not true. They want to be connected. And we're finding that they are very much connected to the EC fiber territory.
David,
I wouldn't rule them out as a connection.
So a practical question about the physical things. Who is going to pay for if it's determined that the best way to reach a whole bunch of these seasonal people and other people in the community is to print and mail surveys to them, who is paying for that cost?
Well, let's determine what we're talking about, right? So if you could all let Sue know how many addresses on your grand list for premises, not for land, go to.
I thought you had all that. I thought the regional commission already had all that information.
Well, we don't have the addresses, we have the numbers.
We don't have all your grand list information.
Right. So
Okay,
we have
911
counts
we have 911 addresses and miles
So
of roadway.
what we need to know is how many premises in your town does the tax bill go to somebody outside of your town?
Right.
And
Well,
that's
what about people within the town? There are going to be many people in many of these towns that, if you really want to reach them, the most effective way is going to be to physically send them something. It won't just be people who live out of
I
town.
don't think we have the budget to send a card to everybody in the region.
Okay.
Marlboro's paying for it.
Marlboro's paying.
You want to get it done, you may work.
I mean, getting back to something that someone else said, I mean, obviously, the irony of this whole thing is you really wouldn't think that mailing things to people who are underserved for broadband is not a fairly logical thing to have thought to do. I mean, I know that there's overlap and many of these people do, but obviously if you really want to get to people who are not served by broadband,
It's true. I've been reading about what
they're going to have to do
other
that.
states. In some communities, they actually go door to door. You basically create canvassing teams and you go door to door and do it that way. That's why we were talking about transfer stations. Brookline actually has a transfer. I guess you guys still have. You don't anymore.
We have an unmanned.
Right, but have somebody, but if you know a particularly busy time, have people down there We can get you some cards.
Newfane comments.
All right.
Everybody's got a town report, the mailing going.
What's that?
Everybody's got to mail out a town report.
Yeah, if you haven't already mailed out your town report, that's possible. Yeah, so.
But this isn't, we're not meeting until February 6th to even start to discuss the survey, right? So
That's as soon as we can do it.
it won't be, oh, no, I know, I'm just saying, for the
Right,
town
so
report, that's going to be.
can't go out in the town
That's
report.
too late for any town report.
Again, this is where, part of what we're going to talk about February 6th is what kind of ideas you're coming up with in your own town. So you may have other ideas, but this is why we're asking folks to kind of go back, and we're happy to talk to you too, to kind of brainstorm ideas. But you know best. I mean, in another situation, if something's critical, how have you reached out to other people in your town? Maybe you want to look. Maybe you want to look at your local emergency management plan and say, hey, how have we said we're going to reach out to people in the event of a pandemic flu situation, and we're trying to get people in to get vaccinated?
And I assume we could also, even if the survey's not available yet, you could put something in your town report of come to the town offices or come to town meeting or the libraries to fill out the survey, and potentially that you can even provide a web address for people to fill it out online, but say it's not available until this date. Like, there's ways around this.
Is it going to be is this a blind survey we're talking about, or is this a controlled by address survey?
I think we're asking for address,
You're asking for address, so it is a personalized survey.
because we want to be, we need to know on the map, where are you?
But you also want one survey per household, right?
Right.
You don't want 6 people in one household filling out the same thing, and
Exactly.
6 other people don't do anything. So
Right.
that's what's going to be tough to control.
Unless there are 6 households
One
in
of
the
the things
building.
that
Peter?
Comcast does when you can have 5 different bills within your property. That are 5 different bills that are, and so that node of the network is actually not just one person, it's actually 5
Like-
separate.
The survey, I think, tries to address multi-tenant
Right.
situations, so.
Peter?
2 questions. The first one is, are we sending the survey to businesses, organizations, religious institutions, et cetera? We all have people who live in our towns who own a business in town who may want it at home and at their business. And we also have people who may be a minister in town who wants it at the church or other religious institution. So that's my first question.
That sounds very Guilford-esque. I know who you're talking about.
So far, we haven't decided to send it physically yet.
Well,
right?
to get it out there.
Yes, we want every premise that has the potential for being served to do a survey, if at all possible.
My second question is, have you determined what the minimum response rate is to have a viable survey, both per town and for the region?
As I said earlier, I think we're looking at about 30%.
Okay, thank you, sorry, I missed that.
Roger?
In Dummerston, we have a quarterly newsletter, and the next issue is going out at the end of February. So we'll put an article in there about this. And I know that Wardsboro has one. There may be other towns that have them. So I encourage everybody in your towns to talk to whoever does that newsletter to get something in there. That'd be a good way to get the word out.
Also, Front Porch Forum, any neighborhood Facebook groups, different nonprofits in the area. There's a lot of ways that we can brainstorm to get it out. We're going to talk about that in early
I
February.
mean, a lot of the smaller towns, I'm thinking Athens, you have only a few entry points in. Brookline, you only have a few entry points in. Consider sandwich board signs. I know it's snowing. I know it's not perfect, but it's probably cheaper than flying a banner behind an airplane. But there are lots of ways to try to get at this. And some are going to be somewhat non-conventional.
And the more excitement and energy behind it in the communities, the more the word will get out. So, don't hesitate to tell people about it tomorrow.
So, just a comment on the survey. You mentioned that you want all the results for your survey by March 17th. I think was the date you put out there. I mean, it seems like it's still valuable to continue that survey if you only have 30% or 40% of the results. To keep pushing to get more results from your town after that, because that information would still be valuable to your actual build-out, assuming that it's feasible and you're actually going to do a build-out. So I just want to mention that, just think that, okay, March 17th, that's it, we're done. I think you want to continue beyond that and try to get as much information as you can from all of your residents.
One thing I just want to know, I mean, the timing is not perfect, the time of year is not perfect, but we couldn't actually start this until we actually had authorization from the state to start work. And that's why I'm not knocking the state, it's just, this whole process has been kind of, hurry up, and I mean, ever since the legislation passed, and I'm not exactly sure why it's been hurry up the whole time, but as opposed to kind of thinking through like where we are at the time of year. But it is what it is, so just we'll work with you to try to help augment whatever you got to make the most of this, and we just hope you'll work with us to again try to make the best of the situation. I know it's not perfect, but it's the way the dice roll. So let's take a few more and then we'll wrap up. Munson?
Just a quick question. I'm sure that should some ambitious town decide they needed more information, you wouldn't have anything against us or someone having a supplemental survey going alongside?
No, as long as it was,
Separate, right. We didn't send it to you.
I would
We'll
just
let
be
you
wary
go.
about a
We'll
survey
let
that's
you
too long, might reduce overall take rates.
Yeah.
It's the only word of caution.
Yes, sir.
I just have a question more for the EC Fiber folks. Since you've had this model that you have, how many times have you increased rates?
Just.
Because broadband, I think broadband is not regulated, correct? Okay.
January 1 is the very first time we increased rates, and we did it minimally, but we also increased speeds. We've been increasing speeds every year, and this is the first time we increased rates. And partly because there's only so many things like healthcare and operational costs like that that you can absorb without increasing rates. But this is the very first time that we've done it.
And how long have you been?
Since 2011. Yeah, most of the time we just increase broadband. So,
Any other
as
questions?
I said, in most cases they
We
want
haven't
$5.
seen the sign-up sheet. Yeah.
Sign-up sheet, where is it in the room? It's Excel spreadsheet. There you go.
Please make sure you sign that before you leave.
So it looks like we're winding down.
A lot of us did not get that sign-up sheet.
So if you don't have the sign-in sheet yet, whoever's got it, where's the sign-up sheet right now?
We got a long way to go.